Welcome to the Time to Fly podcast. It's time to give your business wings and take flight to achieve more impact, influence, and income with unique perspectives, tools, and tips from successful entrepreneurs and business professionals to help your business fly. Here to educate, encourage, and entertain you with their own unique perspectives and experience, plus sharing anecdotes of growing up as cowgirls. Here's your host, Jill Fleming.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Time to Fly. I'm your host today, Jill Fleming, and today my featured guest is Carolynn Bottino. As a bookkeeper, Carolynn Bottino has had the honor and privilege of working with dozens and dozens of clients, and she began to see various money patterns. She discovered that no matter how much money people did or didn't have, what matters is how they felt about money. She also saw that everyone had a money story, and it was impacting their ability to attract and receive abundance. It became very apparent that she was more than just a bookkeeper. She had a calling to help people become empowered around their money. Her clients often tell her that she has a natural gift to teach people how to interact with their money in a way that transforms their relationship with money. This is how her Money Empowerment Project was born. Welcome, Carolynn.
Thanks for having me.
So Carolynn, tell me a little bit more about this Money Empowerment Project.
Yeah, so the Money Empowerment Project is really this brainchild that came about because I just started seeing a lot of entrepreneurs really struggle with their money. As a bookkeeper, I have a privilege of seeing, very in-depth relationships with money, and especially women entrepreneurs just really tend to either avoid their money or really struggle with understanding their money. And I feel like I have this calling to help people understand that money is just this energy that helps you get things in this world that support your life's desires. And so coming at money in a very different way than most financial people has really helped me find my niche in the bookkeeping market. And I just love talking to especially women entrepreneurs. I mean, I definitely work with some men, but I found that I really have this gift for helping people grow and expand their business and their abundance by really looking at their relationship to money. And that starts with understanding what's happening in their business.
So Carolynn, tell me a little bit more, what got you into doing bookkeeping? So you originally started doing bookkeeping, and then you've transitioned into being more in this Money Empowerment Project. So what is it that you love about numbers?
Oh, that's a great question. So I actually kind of fell into bookkeeping. Most of my corporate career was in event planning, and I still do event planning as part of my business. But a lot of people think that those two things are so different, but really they're not. It's all project management. And I am a huge detail person. My other business is called All the Details. So definitely detail oriented. And with event planning, you always are doing budgets and dealing with numbers as far as all the contracts and everything else that goes into it. And I just had this skill to manage numbers, and it didn't really matter how big or small the budget was, but I always was very good with dealing with numbers. Part of my money story is that how I really started my business is that I was running an event center, and I had been running it for about 7 years. So it was kind of like running my own business, but I was working for a nonprofit that owned this event center. And we had acquired a second building, and the second building was in desperate need of repair. And we had created a business plan for this second building, which included renovation and all sorts of other things, and fundraising plan. And when it came down to it, my boss had asked me if I wanted to take the job of running both centers. And I was like, sure, that's not a problem as long as you want to compensate me. But at the time, there was really not a structure to it until we really created what it was going to look like. And once we went through that process, it took about a year. I'd put a lot of time and effort into creating the process. It came time to negotiating what my salary would look like. And I told my boss that it was time to compensate me for the work that I was doing. And we started talking about salary, and he wanted to pay me a 4% raise for doubling my workload, essentially. And that didn't sit so well with me. So at that point, told him no. And we negotiated for a couple of weeks and just didn't come to any agreement. Mm-hmm. And so I told him I'd be happy to go back to doing what I was doing before, but I was not going to take on the second building for a 4% raise. And he was not super happy about that. So he fired me.
Wow.
And yeah, it was kind of a shock to the ego, of course. And what was funny about it was that I had, up until that point, I had received nothing but rave reviews from the board, from him. So it kind of came as a shock, but it was kind of the universe's way of saying, it's time.
It's time.
Time to move on.
It's time to fly.
Time to fly, exactly. So it took me all of about, 10 days to figure out that I was going to open my business, but I didn't know what it was going to look like. I didn't know how to do it, what to do, but I knew that it was time. It was definitely time to move on. And so even though that was a huge ego blow, it was absolutely the best thing that could have happened to me. And it was kind of an integral part of my money story because it really was an empowering moment for me to stand up to somebody and say, no, I'm worth so much more and my time is worth so much more. I'm so grateful for having that really terrible thing happen to me.
Isn't it funny how so often we see like these huge catalysts in our life as such a terrible thing in the moment, but we look back on them and they're like, wow, that was such a pivotal turning point. The divine interjects into our life to get us on a different path.
Yes. And I mean, even when it was happening, even that day, I remember thinking, oh yeah, this is for the best. But at the time, it's really scary because it's like, oh God, where am I going to find money? And how am I going to fill this gap? And, and I really ended up starting my business trying to figure out how to fill a gap rather than truly starting a business. And so I kind of had to backpedal a few years later to really adjust. But I don't know that I would have done it without that moment in time pushing me to do it.
So I'm curious, what made you decide to start a business versus just go look for another job? I'm sure as well connected as you were in the industry, you could have made a couple phone calls and had another job within 24 hours. What was that turning point, that decision, I'm going to start a business, I'm going to work for myself versus go work for someone else?
Yeah, there was a couple of things. And I think the main thing was that when you decide you're going to leave a job, a lot of times people are like, oh, I've got to find another job. I've got to look for a certain thing that looks in this box. Whereas when I was fired, all of a sudden the question is, what should I do? And that's a very different question than where can I find a job? And it just opens this huge space for whatever's possible. And I did have a couple of people that immediately wanted to hire me. I had people saying, I want you to apply for this job or that job. And it just didn't feel right. I didn't want to jump back into that same grind. I had actually looked at starting my own business probably, 8 or 9 years before that point. And I'd done a ton of research on, how to do it in the state I was living in at the time in Utah. And so I kind of had some ideas of what to do. And I even had a name, which I didn't end up using, but I had a name at the time. And I think that I also was in a group of friends at the time that all were business owners as well. And so my expansiveness had grown significantly from the time that I had gotten my job running the event center to when I was fired because of the people I was around as well. I was inspired by other friends that I had that owned their own businesses. And really when it came down to it, I felt like I was running a business, but I didn't really have the freedom. And I think that, you have this false sense of security with a job. Mm-hmm. Everybody is so funny about, oh my God, what are you going to do now? Because that's so scary to be an entrepreneur. But really, I have, 50, 60 clients. And if I lost any of those clients, yeah, I'm sad to see them go, but I can easily fill that little tiny hole a lot easier than just one giant hole when you lose.
You have a lot of eggs in your basket instead of one golden egg that can crack.
Yes. Yeah. And I really think that you have this false sense of security when you have a job, because at any time they could go under, they could fire you, they could, you can part ways. Reorganize, whatever happens, you don't have the security that you think you do.
Right.
Whereas when you're a business owner, you make your own security.
Right.
And it's very empowering.
It is very empowering. And you mentioned that it was the people you surrounded yourself with. I remember when I was looking at leaving my corporate job to go full-time with my business, it's interesting the points of view you would get if I would talk with fellow coworkers and like, oh, that's a terrible idea. And then I would talk with other business owners and they're like, oh my gosh, do it. It's going to be great. So it really is all around perspective, and who you surround yourself with is very important on getting that feedback. And the employee mentality would be like, oh, it's super scary, don't do it. Whereas when you talk with other business owners, they're like, you know what? I'm very upfront with people. It is not for the faint of heart. You do have to have a lot of resilience, but it's very rewarding, and there's a lot that comes from it. It is all up to you. And guess what? You have control of that. You lost a client. Guess what? You get on the phone, you go to some networking events. There's things that you have control of that you can do to help change that and shift that, versus being at the mercy of a boss or a company or whatever their big decision is.
Yes, absolutely. Agreed 100%. And now that I'm where I am now, there is no way I would ever go back to a corporate job. Like it's just not in my DNA.
I've decided I am unemployable.
Yes, I would say I'm the same.
I just can't do it. Whatever, there are some tough times in business, and I think it's like, oh, maybe I should just go back and get a job. It always is a motivator to go out and make the phone calls and go network and do the things I need to do to drum up some business.
Absolutely. I'm with you 100%.
It is definitely a motivator. How long have you been in business as a bookkeeper?
So what ended up happening is that as I sat in bed lying there thinking, what can I do?
Mm-hmm.
One of the skills that came up was bookkeeping, and I've always enjoyed it. For probably 20 years, I've had a personal assistant client. I just did that on the side, and I did a couple of side jobs here and there for people. So in addition to event planning, I decided to combine the event planning with the bookkeeping. And then I also did some personal assistant stuff. So I'd say, technically I've been doing bookkeeping for like 20 years, but I've been in business, in true business, for 5 years as of October 1st. So
congratulations.
Yeah. So I just hit my 5-year mark. And it's kind of funny because as I was figuring out what the skill set was, like I said, I was trying to fill this gap. And it was such an odd thing because it's like, okay, my salary was X, so I need to make X dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And assuming that I don't work 8 hours a day because I need to have some time for sales, I need X number of billable hours. I had all this formula worked out. I had read somewhere that when you're setting your pricing, you should basically charge 3 times as what you would get in a corporate job. And I heard that. I was like, no way, that's crazy.
Uh-huh.
And, here 5 years later, I'm like, oh my God, why didn't I do that?
Right.
Because I had to come back, and I've completely restructured my business and my pricing structure and really how I work with people. But when I started, I was doing an hourly rate, and I'm now fully on retainer. And I really wish I would have charged that 3 times, but it was so scary at the time because I thought, oh my God, nobody's going to pay that. And I'm not going to be able to make money. And I really came at it from a scarcity standpoint instead of value or a abundance standpoint. Mm-hmm. And so many times I think we make those decisions from a scarcity place, and it really attracts more scarcity. That was one of the biggest learning points for me as a business owner, is to truly value your services and what you provide to the people you work with, because it changes the relationship you have with your clients and customers. Because if you are giving 110% of yourself, then you also should be compensated for giving 100% of yourself. And in return, those clients are respecting you at that same level and giving you 110% of what they need to give in order to get the most out of the relationship that you have with those clients. And I think sometimes when you undervalue yourself in your pricing, you end up having less than awesome relationships with your clients because of that, whether that's you resenting them or them not respecting your time. I mean, it shows up in a lot of different forms, but that pricing is so key to your success and your happiness and your abundance, really.
Yes, absolutely. And it is interesting, the learning curve as business owners go through of usually new business owners have such a hard time charging what they're worth.
Mm-hmm.
and seeing the value in it. And often they go to the market of like, oh, well, what is everybody else charging? Versus actually looking at their bottom line and going, okay, these are my expenses. These are where I'm at. These are, what I need to have to make a good living. And then how do you create that? And I was thinking this morning as I was getting ready to interview you of bookkeeping is so important. So I encourage everyone listening to either talk to Carolyn or get a bookkeeper if you're resisting your numbers. Because even for me, I found I have a degree in business and finance and taken all the accounting classes, but I hate doing my books. I hate doing the accounting piece of it and putting all of that in. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's my creative side and resistance, but I have just decided having a bookkeeper, having a CPA, having those people on your team is so important to running a successful business.
Yes. And a lot of times I see a lot of resistant people because I think
really?
And I think a lot of it is the fear of the unknown. And really, it's the relationship you have with money. Because if you're afraid of what you're going to see, then you're bringing a lot of fear into that relationship you have with money. And if you think of money as a relationship, just like think of it as a friendship. Mm-hmm. So if you have fear with a friend, you're probably not going to hang out very often. You might like that friend, but maybe you're just afraid to talk to that friend because you feel like they're so much better than you, or they're not going to like you, or whatever that fear is. Like your relationship isn't going to really flourish. Mm-hmm. And if you think of money that way, then you're going to have a hard time truly bringing in abundance. Whereas if you treat that friend with, open and honest communication and respect and give it some time and some love, then you're going to have a lot more abundance in your life because you are nurturing that relationship. And I know that sounds kind of woo-woo, but it's true. I mean, I've seen this so many times with my clients that the people who are resistant have a harder time bringing in revenue and bringing in profits. Whereas the people who are embracing it, and I've seen people totally shift their energy and their relationship with money and have seen a shift in how much money they can bring in just from how they interact with their numbers. And the other piece of that is that if you don't like doing numbers, that's okay. You don't have to like it. But what I really think most business owners don't understand is that if you get the right people on your team that can help you look at your numbers, it totally changes that relationship. Because most people are like, oh, I avoid it. And oh shit, it's April 15th and I've got to do something because it's tax time. Whereas if you use your bookkeeper or CPA or whoever you're working with to your advantage, you can be looking at your numbers all the time. And there's very interesting things to be told in those numbers, because it might be that you really don't like doing something in your business, but for some reason you think that that's where your money comes from. But when you nail down the numbers, you might realize that that's really not your most profitable area of your business. And you should stop doing it and do more of something else that brings in a lot more. And if you have your numbers organized in a way that you can actually see that on paper, it then makes those decisions about which direction you want to go or what types of clients you want to bring in. It makes that a lot clearer. And so really it's a tool more than anything. And if you don't like doing the actual bookkeeping or analysis or whatever, that's okay. But at least, look at your numbers, find the right team to help you, to support you, so that way you can have the ability to just look at them. It doesn't have to take very long. You can take 10, 15 minutes a month or even a quarter, and it will make a big difference in your business. And the other pieces the other resistance that I hear is that, oh, that's got to be really expensive to hire a bookkeeper. And while yes, there is a cost, a good bookkeeper is actually going to save you money or make you money, because you're going to be paying attention to things that you wouldn't see otherwise. Like a lot of times I find people have a couple of subscriptions to things that either they don't use, or duplicate subscriptions, or they accidentally pay somebody twice and they don't realize that they have, or they don't realize how expensive one program is, and they should just stop doing it altogether. Whatever those things are, when you have the right people on your team, you can really save money or earn money. And those things that you see pay for somebody like me probably 10 times over.
I know exactly what you're saying. Of last year, I drew a line in the sand, and it's not that I resist looking at it. It's just, I hate doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I hate putting the numbers in, downloading it, reconciling. I realized I just don't like to do it. And last year I got a bookkeeper and I got a CPA, and I'm like, okay, you guys do this and I'll look at it. I don't have to do this. So being willing to outsource those things that you just don't like to do.
Absolutely.
And that's freed me up to have more freedom in my business. And I've noticed that by paying more attention to that and having my numbers, it really makes a difference in my bottom line even this year. What you say is true. My bottom line has definitely increased this year. So definitely pay attention to your numbers. And if you don't like to do it like me, hire someone, because it is so well worth it. So speaking of tools that you mentioned, we always like to ask, what is like an app or resource you find yourself relying on that makes your life easier?
Well, the obvious one is QuickBooks for me. I mean, I use it every day for all of my clients and for myself. But the other one that I use a lot is Wunderlist, which I believe Microsoft Office just purchased Wunderlist, but it's a task management system. And for me, I am a huge task person. I love lists. I constantly am writing lists. And so I love to be able to divide my list by projects. I especially do this when I'm working on an event, where I will create my timeline and my task list, and it will all be organized by what project I'm working on. And then I just love crossing things off. So for me, I love to get it all out of my head and onto paper, so that I don't have to think about it again. And then I pull up my task list. I'm like, oh yeah, these are the phone calls I have to make today, or these are the decisions I have to get done today. And then I don't have to think about it again. Whereas if I keep all that in my head, I just start swimming in way too many details. And that's what wakes me up at night going, oh yeah, remember to do this or remember to do that. But if I have it all on my task list, then it frees up a ton of brain space.
I have that too. If I sometimes at night, I just have to wake up and write it all down, so my brain can be like, okay, she'll remember. I'm like, yes, I will remember. So with that, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Beyond Logic Coaching and Consulting with strategist, visionary, entrepreneur, and best-selling author Jill Fleming. Get your free gift at livingbeyondlogic.com.
And we're back. I'm here with Carolynn Bottino with all the details. And Carolynn, you're an amazing bookkeeper. You do event planning, but what you really love to do is this money empowerment project.
Yes.
Tell me more about that and what got you to that space.
Yeah. So I was working really, really hard in my business. I was kind of a victim of my own success. I had no problem whatsoever finding new clients, which is a great problem to have, but it's still a problem. I was working crazy hours, like 60 hours a week plus, and I just could not figure out a way to let go. I couldn't say no. I didn't want to say no to new clients, but I also didn't want to work as hard as I was working. And so I knew something needed to change. And so I started to invest in myself. I hired a business coach. I started doing some business trainings. And while I knew a lot about business, I knew that I needed to just shift something. And so when I hired my business coach, the main thing I hired her to do was to help me figure out a new structure for my business. And that involved hiring an employee. And I had tried to hire somebody before, and it was this horrible mess, and I didn't know what had gone wrong. But she really helped me break down what I was looking for in a person, not just, the skill set, but really that energetic person that would help to make my life easier and also add something to my business that I could offer to my clients. And I am very successful. I have an awesome person that I work with. I actually have 2 people that I work with now. But what happened in that process is that I was able to really break down what my true essence, what my special sauce was in the bookkeeping that I did. Because I knew that I was doing more than just bookkeeping for people, but I couldn't really define it. And as I broke that down, what became apparent was that I was really good at empowering people around their money. So I wasn't just entering their data and pulling reports for them. I was really going in and analyzing what was happening in their business and what was happening with themselves around their money. When I very, very first started in the corporate world, I worked in nonprofit and I had learned to fundraise. And that's actually how I got into event. And with fundraising, there was this whole aspect, money stories that came up. Because a lot of people, when they start to fundraise, they're like, oh, I can't ask for money. That's just horrible. And I was very lucky that I learned to fundraise from some very wealthy women. And I had this major aha when I realized that people give because they care about the cause. And when you ask them as a fundraiser to donate, you're not asking them to personally give money to you. You're asking them and providing them with this gift to give to something that you mutually care about. And I had this amazing experience in seeing people and their money and being very grateful for this opportunity to give their money and to create something better in this world through giving of their money. And that experience tied into how people interact with their money and bookkeeping just kind of opened up this whole idea of, wow, people have such stories behind their money and how they interact with their money. Everything that causes people to either want to give money or want to spend money or want to hoard money or whatever it is that people tend to do with their money is all tied back to stories that we tell ourselves or have learned, in our childhood, in our early teens, our first jobs, we all have these experiences that impact what happens with money. And so I started really looking at my clients' stories. And what was really interesting is I have clients all over the board. I literally have clients that every month they are in overdraft. And then I have clients that have millions in the bank. I mean, I have everything in between. And I also have clients that feel truly abundant in their lives, and they might have $200 in their checking account. And I have people who have hundreds of thousands of dollars in their bank account who feel like they don't ever have enough, and they operate from scarcity. And I stepped back and I thought, wow, this is really interesting, because it's not defined by the number in your bank account. It's really defined by your own perception. And if you're able to really look at money in a different way, how does that shift? What does that shift do for you? And for me, I started having this own experience in my life where I was having a money freak out. I was probably in my 20s and I was freaking out about where I was going to, how I was going to pay my bills. And I wasn't particularly close with my dad at the time. But I had mentioned this to him, and he's like, has there ever been a point in your life where you were not able to pay your bills or you didn't pay your bills? And I sat there for a second. I was like, no. It's like, well, then why are you freaking out about it? Can you just trust that you will find a way? Oh, yeah. Yes, I can. And all of a sudden that stress around, oh my God, I've got to find money, just kind of went away, because I knew that I would always find money, whether that meant I'd go find a job at Starbucks or I would create that money. I knew that I had the ability to create that money if I needed it. And I think so many times in this world, and especially in America here, we are constantly told we need to fit into this mold. It's like the Matrix. You're told how much you're worth, you're told how much you're going to get, and you're told that you've got to work really, really hard to make money. And it's not that way. It doesn't have to be that way. But it takes some mind shift to really grasp that the universe wants to send you money, but you have to be open to receiving it.
And in ways that you may not expect.
Yes.
We often get so attached to how the money should show up.
Yes.
It needs to show up from one little channel. And if it doesn't come there, then it's not there. I can't have it. That's so
Yes.
funny.
Yes. So really those personal experiences and my gift of seeing what was happening with my clients is how the Money Empowerment Project came about. And really what I do is I have a couple of different products. I'm still kind of it's still formulating, honestly. Like it's still it's a new thing, but it's really looking at your money from a completely different way. And it's a holistic approach. It's looking at your money from both the practical systems and structures that you have in place, but it's also your money mindset. And so as of right now, I am doing like a VIP day. I'm also doing a group program. I'm working on a live event, and I'm also going to be working on a book. But it's really approaching money from a place of abundance and what abundance looks like to you, because it's not a one size fits all. Money is one of those things that's very personal, and your comfort level, what you feel comfortable with. Some people truly feel comfortable with a savings account of $0 or $200 or whatever. And some people don't feel comfortable until they have $1 million literally sitting in their bank account. But what I realized is that you have to be able to enjoy the money that you have. It's really a tool to help you enjoy life. And if you're constantly stressed about it, whether it's how it's coming in or how you're spending it, then something's got to shift.
It's interesting you say that I think as any business owner, I joke as like, we hunt for our food. We have to go out and either find clients or whatever that looks like in your business that keeps the wheels moving. And for me, in my business, it's client-based of finding clients and providing services. And I think in the service-based industry, it can be challenging at times. And it was really interesting for me in my own money story this year of my dad passed away in May. And I was right in the heart of my busy season. And I just couldn't take a break. Like if I was to fall apart, there was no opportunity for that. And that's just not the person that I am. Suck it up, get the job done. And that actually is a lesson that my dad taught me of get the job done. And so I felt like finishing up those jobs and doing that was honoring him. But I got to July and I didn't really have anything on the book. And I had the awareness that I just needed to take a break. And I did. It took me about 10 days to finally lean into it, not be in the human doingness of, oh, I need to be doing my business. I just need to be, and to just trust.
And probably the judgment of yourself.
Yeah. Oh, there was a ton of judgment of myself of I'm being lazy. I'm being, it was definitely a learning month for me of really looking at some of my stuff. And I just had to trust. And I realized that at the end of the month, I had these clients came out of nowhere of, hey, can I book you for this? And hey, can I book you for that? And I didn't actively seek them out. They came to me. Obviously, I'm like, of course you can book me, right? But at the end of the month, I had one of my best months ever. And I wasn't driving. And I just beat. And I was looking at that, kind of reflecting back on that recently. And I was like, what was different? And it was the trust. I trusted that the money would show up. I didn't know how. I didn't know what it would look like. I didn't have any requirements of how that looked. I just trusted that it would show up, and it did. Mm-hmm. And since then, I feel like that was a really pivotal point, even in my own money story, of just learning to trust and being in that space of trusting that the clients will show up. Yes, is there things I need to do? Are there things I need to take action on? Absolutely. You can't hide yourself in a cave and expect people to find you, but just trusting that following the awareness and doing those things that it will show up. And that's been very pivotal for me in my journey.
Yes. And I do think that a lot of people push so hard. And as business owners, we're told we need to grow as fast and as hard as we can. And what I've seen is that sometimes that's not the answer for everybody. And I know that's not the answer for myself, because the more I add onto my plate, the more unhappy I become. And it's not that I don't want more clients, but it's that pushing that really has the impact, instead of really leaning into that client and saying, is this the right fit for both of us? And trusting that, because I really believe that the more you chase money, the more it's going to run. And it's kind of a catch-22 because it's hard to just step back and say, oh, it's going to show up. And I don't think that you should just sit around waiting for money to manifest itself, because yes, you do need to take action to get money. But at the same time, if you are pushing so hard that you're not taking into account how you're getting your money or where it's coming from, then you're not going to get the true satisfaction from that work that you're doing, because there are definitely clients that I've taken on that are not in alignment with me, whether it's they're just not the right fit personality wise, or maybe their business is not something that I truly support. And it's not that I was doing anything shady. It was just, what they did was just not really what I was passionate about. And so really taking a look at and being selective with your clients. And I know that can be really scary. And again, this goes back to that coming at it from scarcity versus coming at it from abundance. Because every time I've just trusted that the abundance is going to come if I come at it from a place of plenty. Whereas if I come at it like I need to pay my bills, so therefore I should take this client, totally different energy.
And it is often a place of scarcity of when you know you're taking on this client, it's not going to work. They're going to be a pain and cause a lot of headaches. That's where that resentment comes from later. If you're like, oh, I knew it. I knew.
Yeah.
That's not a fun place to be. So speaking of that, I've got one final question for you on giving that guidance, on that wisdom. The question is this: in the spirit of getting guidance to entrepreneurs and business professionals, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give to your younger self? And when would you give yourself that advice?
I would say the advice I would give is trust your gut. And I probably would have given that to me the day I got fired from my job, the day I was ready to fly. And the thing that's hard is that people say that all the time, but really internalizing that and understanding what that means and knowing that you're going to be okay if you truly follow your instincts and truly follow your intuition. I think a lot of us are very intuitive and we don't trust it. And the best clients, the best business, the most abundance I've ever felt has always come from those times when I trusted my gut.
That is something for me when I'm working with my clients, of I empower them to trust that inner wisdom, trust their instincts, the intuition. I'm just curious, how have you developed that ability to trust yourself?
Part of it comes from not giving into fear. I think there's a lot of times that I've spent a lot of money on, like when I hired my employee, or when I was going to do something that I normally wouldn't have done or that I was afraid to do. If it felt right, I went for it. And usually those decisions, or always those decisions, I should say, are the ones that have made the most impact in my business when it's felt right. I think it's just practice. Because if you're always afraid and so then you don't do it, then you don't know.
So would you say that you made those choices sometimes beyond logical sense?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I recently moved down to San Diego, which I've wanted to live here my entire life. And I made that decision not necessarily out of logic. I mean, the logical thing would have been to stay where I was. That's where my client base was. But really, when it came down to it, I knew in my gut that this was the place I needed to be. And I knew that I was going to be more than okay. And I didn't lose any of my clients. I'm still doing everything I was doing before, and it's worked out great. But the logical answer would have been, oh yeah, that's silly. Why would you want to move? Why would you want to uproot? But the other side of that was that I knew I didn't want to live in Utah my entire life. I knew I didn't want to retire there. And I knew I wanted to be able to enjoy the sunshine and the ocean while I was still young. And I still could enjoy it. I didn't want to move here when I was like 70 and couldn't walk on the beach. I want to walk on the beach now. So sometimes you make those choices not from logic, but from a desire or from a gut, and you are able to manifest what you want by trusting that it's all going to work out and trusting that you are able to figure it out.
And going beyond logic, which is where I come in and what I like to help people do. I love to hear that story too, because I love when logic oftentimes so much shuts us down of what we should do, but it's that intuition, that heart that's crying out, that wants to be heard. And when you go beyond that logic, like look at what you've experienced here in San Diego.
Yeah.
It was a leap, right? You had to take a leap of faith.
Absolutely.
Take and fly to a new state. It's so amazing as I do that over and over again in my life, what opens up for you. And it's usually beyond what you believed was possible.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and this all kind of stemmed from a conversation my husband and I were having about both of us were working so hard, but finally we're like, but for what?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you working so hard? What is it that you want out of life? And this kind of goes back to the money thing. It's like, if you're working so hard for money, what does that money provide? Or what is it that you want to do with that money that is going to make your life better? Because, you know, sadly, you see all these stories of people working really hard all their life and then they die and there's a big pile of money that they can't take with them. And they never went on that trip they wanted to go on. They never did those things that they dreamed of doing. And, you know, when you say you're going to follow your dreams, I mean, you actually have to follow them. You have to go and do and be, and not just try to get there, because so many times you try, but then, you know, you're not ever actually getting there because you haven't taken that final leap of, okay, spend the money or take the risk. And that's really what it takes, is just practice and knowing and just feeling that that's the right thing at the right time.
Well, thank you so much, Carolyn. I love all the wisdom that you shared with our listeners today. With that, I want everyone to remember, it's time to fly. Give your business wings.
A big thank you to this episode's sponsor, Beyond Logic Coaching and Consulting. Be sure to get your free gift at livingbeyondlogic.com.
Join our flock. Stay informed of all things Time to Fly by subscribing to our newsletter at timetoflypodcast.com. And be sure to tune in to our next show.